Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2014 Audi Q7 with a 3.0 liter. In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace the valve cover gasket. The valve cover gasket on the driver's side is leaking. We're going to replace the valve cover gaskets on both sides. I'm going to show you how to replace the gasket on the driver's side. I will do the passenger side off camera. It's the same process, replacing the valve cover gasket on both sides. So now let's get under the hood so we can get the valve cover gasket replaced. We're gonna remove the engine cover. We're gonna remove the valve cover on the driver's side so we can replace the gasket. I don't want to start the engine so I can show you where the leak is, because if I do start the engine is going to get hot, and then removing the cover will be a lot more challenging. So I am going to not start the engine to show you where the leak is. So just take my word for it. So we're going to have to remove this tube over here, this inlet tube. So I'm going to disconnect this tube here first. We have to remove this tube so we can get access to the valve cover. So I'm gonna undo this clamp first. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to remove anything that's gonna be in the way to get to the valve cover. I'm gonna disconnect this mass airflow sensor electrical connector. So I'm gonna undo this inlet tube. Okay, so we got this guy removed. I'm gonna put it here out of the way. So now I'm going to disconnect this throttle body here. Oh man, there's a lot of carbon built up in this throttle body. We're gonna have to clean this very well. I'm gonna disconnect the other one here. So now I'm gonna undo these bolts over here. There's this one, and then this one here, and then two more at the bottom. And then there's a bracket here I have to undo. And then this clamp for the EGR tube. And then this entire tube over here is gonna come out.
Out the way for a second.
So I'm gonna undo this clamp. There's a clamp over here for the EGR tube. And then I'm gonna undo these bolts up here. So now I'm undoing the last bolt for this throttle body. Alright, so I removed the bolt for the second bracket that holds this tube in place. So this tube should now be able to come out. Once we get this tube out of the way, we should have enough room to the valve cover. Wow, check this out. I don't know if you guys can tell. Look at how much carbon we have in this tube. Let me grab my light. Look. Can you guys see? Look how much carbon buildup we have over here. So we're gonna have to clean this very well. And we have more carbon build up right here. Can you guys see this? All of this is a bunch of carbon built up on this throttle. All right, so let's continue. So now what's next? Now the next step is going to be removing the injectors. We're gonna disconnect all the electrical connectors up here. We're gonna put the wires up, so we're gonna lay the wires up this way, and then we're gonna remove the valve cover. This bracket over here might give us a little bit of trouble before we can remove the valve cover. All right, so we are making progress. So now the next step is going to be disconnecting the fuel return line on the injectors. You guys probably won't be able to see with this fuel filter being in place. I might have to move this out of the way so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, we're just gonna push the filter out of the way like that. So I hope you guys can see. Then I'm gonna bring the light right here. Okay, so now I'm gonna start disconnecting the return line of the fuel injectors. Okay, so the way you disconnect this little locking piece is you pry this up like this, and then you pull it up, and then I'm gonna pull these out just like that. So we got the fuel return line disconnected from the injectors, and then we're gonna push this out of the way. So someone put oil in this engine and they dropped this little piece of plastic that covers the oil jug. They dropped it in the engine. Luckily there's a little filter up there. All right, so now the next step is going to be disconnecting the injector lines. We're gonna disconnect the injector lines. I'm gonna disconnect the electrical connector of the injector first. Now we're gonna disconnect the injector supply line, the fuel supply line to the injector. The injectors have to come out before we can remove the valve cover. Now, I have a story I would like to tell you guys. So, as I'm removing these injectors, I want to tell you what happened to me a little bit ago. So, story time, guys. I had a customer drop off a Sprinter van here, and he found me on YouTube. He emailed me and asked if I could diagnose his Sprinter van. This Sprinter van was losing power. It was not going over 30 miles an hour. I told him, I said, sure, I can look at your van. I mean, I'm here to fix these vans, so if I can help, I would. So bring it so I can take a look. So the customer set up an appointment with me. He came and dropped off his Sprinter van. I looked at it. He actually paid for my diagnosis fee. So he paid the diagnosis fee and I did the diagnosis. So I did the diagnosis the second day after he dropped it off. And then I called him back and figured out what was wrong. So basically, after I diagnosed it, the charge air cooler was leaking. So this is a Sprinter van with a 3.0 liter engine, and oil cooler leaks are very common on those Sprinter vans, especially when they have high mileage. So if you have a Sprinter that has over 150,000 miles, and if it's starting to lose power, you should check your actuator on the turbo or the charge air cooler. Now, the way you can easily tell if you have a charge air cooler that's leaking, you can scroll under the van and look on the sides of the charge air cooler. There are plastic cores on each side. There's a plastic core on each side of the charge air cooler. If that plastic core is wet with oil, if it's covered by engine oil, chances are you have a leak on the charge air cooler. So I looked at it, it was pretty easy to find. The charge air cooler was leaking, so I called the customer back. I told him, hey, Mr. Customer, your charge air cooler is leaking, so we're gonna have to replace the charge air cooler and then try it again. But I was pretty much sure that after we replaced the charge air cooler, this van was gonna be fixed because we power braked it. The other test you can do, if you have a charge air cooler that's leaking, you can power brake the van. Now, you don't want to power brake it for a long time. You can do it just for a little bit, for a few minutes. So what you do is you put it in reverse or drive, then you step on the brake pedal and rev up the engine. If there's a leak somewhere, you're gonna hear a hissing sound coming from wherever the leak is. So we could hear the hissing sound coming from the charge air cooler, so it was easy to find. Anyways, long story short, the charge air cooler was leaking. We gave him a quote for a charge air cooler replacement. The customer approved the work. He said, sure, go ahead and do it. He actually sent me the money. He sent me the money to fix it. I called our local Mercedes dealer to get a charge air cooler. They did not have it in stock, so I had to wait 2 days to get it. So all was well. We were waiting for the part. Okay, guys, let me not get sidetracked here. So now what I'm doing is I removed the injector supply lines. So now I'm removing the fuel rail. So this rail over here is gonna get removed. So I'm disconnecting all the lines that connect to the fuel rail before we can remove it. Anyways, back to our story. So I ordered a charge air cooler from Mercedes. So they told me 2 days. I was waiting for the charge air cooler. And then I think just a day went by. I was going into the shop. Then I realized that where I parked the van wasn't there anymore. I was like, this is interesting. So I went outside, look where I park all the vehicles. This white van was not there. I mean, I had 2 vans at a time. There was a white one and a black one. So if you have a van parked outside the shop and if it's no longer there, you're gonna notice. So I came that one morning, I realized that that van was not there. I looked around, I couldn't find the van, and I started panicking. I was like, what the frick? Did this guy come back and pick up the van without telling me? So I asked everybody around, I asked the guys in the shop, I asked everybody, did you guys see the van? They said, no, we didn't see the van. I was like, did someone drive this van? They said no. Now, I went back in the shop and I looked into my toolbox because I usually put the keys, all the keys for the vehicles in the box here in the shop. So I went there and the key for the van was in my box, but the van wasn't outside. Guys, I got so confused and I freaked out. I was like, what the frick just happened? Did someone come steal this van? I was like, dang, do I need to call the insurance company? So I talked to my other friend. So here comes the fuel rail. This is the fuel rail on the driver's side. It has the fuel pressure sensor on it. Okay, so this rail has 2 bolts that hold it, that bolts this rail on the head. Anyways, so back to our story. I was like, what the frick? Did someone come here, pick it up? So as soon as I found the key in my toolbox, I got so confused. So I started calling everybody I knew, like someone came here and stole the van. And then my friend actually asked me and said, hey, you should call the owner of that van. Call him and see if he came and picked it up. Now, I was kind of hesitating to call the guy because I didn't want to get him freaked out first. So I waited. I was like, let me wait first and see. Maybe I'm gonna find the van. So I called the guy, I called the owner, and I told him, hey, you parked the van over here and I was waiting for the parts, but we didn't see the van. Like the van is not here. Did you come pick it up? The guy said, no, I didn't pick up the van. The van is still there at your shop. So at this point, I'm panicking, guys. I'm like, wow, so this van is stolen. Someone stole this van. Now, I didn't want to sound like I was determined. I didn't want to sound like I already knew that the van was stolen. So now we're gonna remove the injector. So then my friend was like, hey, call the owner of the van and ask him to see if he owns the van. So I called the guy. I was like, hey, did you come pick up the van? He goes, no, I didn't pick it up. So I freaked out. I was like, dang, so someone stole this van. So here comes the first injector. I'm going to use my nail polish here to mark the first injector. So I'm gonna put a mark right here on the injector. Okay, so this is the first injector on this bank. So first injector on the bank, on the driver's side bank. So when we reinstall this injector, it has to go back here. And we're gonna use our nail polish to mark these injectors. Anyways, so back to our story. So the guy said he didn't pick up the van. So at this point, I'm like panicking. So did someone come steal the van? And then we were getting ready to call the police. So here comes the second injector. I'm gonna mark the second injector too. So this injector came out with its seal. Let me check the first one. Did it come out with the seal? Yeah, the seal on the first injector, right here. The seal on the first injector is there. Okay, so now I'm gonna mark this second injector. Let's put a mark here. So 1, 2. Just 2 lines here. So we know this is the second injector on this bank. So anyways, so then my friend asks me and says, do you think this guy owns the van? So at this point, I'm confused. I don't know. I'm like, I don't ask people if they own the vehicle when they drop it off at my shop. I don't know if this guy owns the van. Well, then my friend said, before you call the police, call the owner back, call the owner of the van and ask him if he owns the van. So what I'm doing right now, I am rocking the injector back and forth and I'm pulling it out. So here it comes. Here is the third injector. Anyways, so back to the story. My friend suggested that I call the owner back and ask him if he owns the van. So I called the owner of the van and asked him and said, hey, we still can't find the van, but we're about to get the police involved. Do you own the van? The guy says, no, I don't own the van. Actually, I owe a little bit on it. I was about to make payments. So I called the customer. I asked him if he owns the van. He says, no, I don't own the van, but he's like, I was talking to the bank, the guys at the bank. I did miss a couple payments. Once he said that, I felt relieved. I was like, whew. I say, why don't you call the bank and figure out if it's the bank that came and picked up the van? At this point, I'm like super mad and really pissed off because I'm nervous and I have stopped all the projects that I was working on at the time to try to figure out where that van went. And then I told him, I said, hey, call your bank right now, figure out if they can pick it up and then call me back. So about half hour later, the owner of the vehicle calls me and says, oh, I'm so sorry, the bank came and picked it up from your shop. So long story short, the repo man came and picked up the van from our shop while we were gone. So they came pick it up. They came and picked it up at night. So at this point, I'm really pissed off. I have lost sleep over this, you know, and this is the second day. So I was very nervous and I didn't know what to do. So the next day, the owner tells me that the repo man came and repoed the vehicle. I was so mad. I just told him and said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna refund you the money because he already sent me the money to replace the charger cooler. I said, I'm just gonna refund you your money. And he was apologizing. He was so sorry about what happened. But in my mind, I was like, no, I don't wanna deal with this. You can just take your money and leave. So he came and picked up his refund. He came and got his money and left. So that really stressed me out, guys. I was very stressed about that thing. So that's a crazy story. Now, my question to you is, if that happened in your shop, what do you think you could have done? Or tell me what you could have done if that happened in your shop. All right, so we're making progress. I pretty much have everything disconnected and removed from the valve cover. So now there's this PCV tube over here that I have to disconnect. It's a really weird tube. All right, so I got this tube disconnected. There's this PCV tube over here. This tube can be difficult to disconnect. So what I did was I used this pick and I went around this tube over here. So you have to push it in a little bit to release the tension and then go around. There's a little tab over here that holds it against the valve cover. So you push it in, you release the pressure, you get your pick, you kind of go around it and then you pull out. Okay? So at this point, I can start removing our valve cover bolt, and after that, the valve cover is going to come out. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 bolts for the valve cover. Okay, now I'm just trying to make sure that I have enough room to lift this valve cover. All right, so all of that to say, I had a Sprinter van that got repoed by the repo man while it was at my shop. Okay, so now there's a zip tie that I have to undo over here. So now I'm gonna start undoing the valve cover bolts. So at this point, I'm making sure that I can get all the valve cover bolts undone, and then we should be good to go. And then our valve cover should be able to come out. Now, the thing about these German cars is that you have to be very patient when you work on these vehicles, because there are so many plastic components around these engines, and if you're not careful, you can break stuff very easily. So there is a bolt that's hidden down here. Okay, so I got that off. Got that undone. So I got all the bolts for the valve cover undone. Now I'm gonna get ready to lift the valve cover. Okay, so now I can just lift this wiring harness and push it up here out of the way. Nice, very nice. Just like this. Actually, I can get a bungee cord and bungee these out of the way. Let me grab a bungee cord so I can push these guys out of the way. So we're gonna use this bungee cord and bungee these stuff out of the way. Hold on, how am I gonna do this? Okay, so we put a bungee cord here. Now our valve cover should come out. So I'm gonna use this flat screwdriver. I'm gonna get at an angle here, and I'm gonna start prying the valve cover. Okay, we're gonna start prying it up, just like that. Nice. Easy peasy. So now here comes our valve cover. Okay. Now we just have to make sure that the valve cover can come out freely. So here comes our valve cover. Okay. So I'm gonna get this valve cover out of the way. Now I'm going to wipe down the valve cover gasket surface, and then I'll bring you here so you can see these camshafts, the timing chain, and the timing chain sprocket is back there. This is interesting. But overall, doing this job wasn't pretty hard. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So removing this valve cover wasn't too bad. So I'm cleaning the surface here. Okay, so now I'm gonna clean the injector hole. We're gonna use this little wire brush and clean the injector hole. Now you have to always make sure that the injector hole is clean You have to make sure you get rid of all the carbon inside the injector hole, because if you don't clean it, even if you replace the injector seal, that little copper washer on the injector tip, if there's too much carbon in the injector hole, the seal is not gonna sit properly, and that's gonna cause some compression leaks on the injector hole. Okay, so we're gonna blow these off. I'm gonna look inside here. Everything looks nice and clean. We have removed the valve cover. Here's what we have. I have cleaned the gasket surface. Here is our camshaft sprocket bug here with the timing chain. Okay, so everything is prepped and ready to go. Our gasket surface is clean. So now let's prep our valve cover. I'm gonna clean the valve cover off camera. I'm also going to clean this throttle body here. Look at all this carbon that we have. Okay, so I'm gonna clean this off camera, and then I will bring you guys back up so we can prep our valve cover.